Nice car!
2012. The world didn't end there, but hell did we get some bad shows from that point on. Although bad shows have always existed, so these previous lines were completely pointless, demonstrating our incapability to write meaningful intros. Regardless, Hagure Yuusha no Aesthetica, at least the anime adaptation, is an interesting show for a few reasons. Early in a time period where most seasonal anime had boring, vanilla main characters, Hagure Yuusha had its 5 minutes of fame for having a cool protagonist and 1 or 2 very famous scenes. Add Isekai elements, harem, and a lot of ecchi, and there you go. A generic Isekai story, minus the cardboard MC, that is. Nowadays, Hagure Yuusha isn't doing so great, being only remembered by those who watched it back then and without much, if any, traction in 2022. Today, it's time to take a look at this relic of the past, representing what was popular with edgy and horny teenagers back in 2012. So let's hope that nostalgia can carry the entire thing on its own.
When I was part of the target audience years ago, I certainly thought that the anime was fun and cool. The main character, Akatsuki, was really strong and did whatever the fuck he wanted. Most of the jokes worked back then, and big boobs and waifus did the rest. A cool, edgy anime with cute waifus and a chat protagonist was the selling point. And it kinda worked. Now, years later, my perspective is totally different. While Akatsuki still has its appeal as an overpowered main character, at least in my opinion, the rest of the cast is pretty generic, and the art style is as bland as it gets. Lots of jokes are either boring or lack real impact, though a few scenes are still oddly interesting, be it for the right or the wrong reasons. Regardless, the anime feels boring at times. You can still laugh with the show, mostly at the expense of the production, sure, but it's mostly, and honestly, a skippable watch, and most of its value comes from analyzing the show and its context, rather than the piece itself, which is kinda sad.
I have to admit that while the concept for the series and its protagonist is quite interesting, the lack of traction it has nowadays has set my expectations quite low. And I wasn't really wrong. While I don't find it aggressively unfunny compared to other series we've talked about in the past, the jokes mostly landed flat for me on the comedy department, the majority of them being just punchlines with no setup. The animation is the aspect that showed the least amount of care in the production to me, with inconsistent character proportions, stiff movements, and the lack of dynamic poses and angles, except for frames where they try to emulate more iconic works. We'll get more into details later, but it definitely isn't a series I would recommend for the enjoyment value it has. It is, however, a good window into the 2012 anime mindset that can give us a bit of perspective when compared to current trends.
To be honest, I thought watching this anime 10 years after its release was going to be painful, and I was afraid of destroying the image I had of it since it was my favorite anime back in the day. But I was kind of wrong. It was enjoyable to watch, although maybe for the wrong reasons. For example, I love rewatching it in a way higher streaming quality. I still like some of the humor, and I had a good time trying to break down the world that was presented. My weones already talk about the downsides of the show, and I agree on most of their opinions, but I'm nowhere near as demanding as them, so I usually oversee a lot of things. That's why I feel the need to talk about what I liked before anything else. Number 1, there are tits and sets jokes. Number 2, the protagonist is still great, his arrogant and perverted nature is enjoyable. Number 3, I like the fighting aspects such as abilities, magic and weapons. Then, number 4, there is an actual plot and a story behind all the pointless stuff. And I know you don't believe me, but hear me out, it's fascinating to think about it.
The story itself is pretty simple. We follow the tale of Akatsuki Osawa, a hero from a different world, who slayed the demon lord and became a hero. However, he honored his opponent's last wish, sparing the life of his daughter, Miu, while keeping her safe. For such a reason, Akatsuki decides to go back to his own world.
So, there are essentially 2 factions in Akatsuki's world. One is Cocoon, controlling the Babel schools monopolizing all Isekai heroes returning to their world. And the other one is a terrorist group called Crimson Twilights, both fighting each other. One character is introduced for each faction. There is Kiyoya Hikami, the president of Akatsuki's Babel facility, who is presented as some sort of rival or person to beat right away. There is also Motoharu Kaido, who is part of the terrorist group. He showed up as a friendly, secretive guy who is apparently really strong, both of them trying to figure out how powerful Akatsuki is in order to recruit him. Akatsuki was labeled as a true hero and overlord after his Babel DNA test of sorts. This is the reason why Cocoon became interested in him. In the case he's a threat and can't be recruited, they will eliminate him. Akatsuki's family includes a brief mention of both his dead/missing sister and his father. Maybe the guy shown in TV for one scene. Now the Isekai world. It's shown a few times and it let us know that there are 4 factions, but they don't go into a lot of detail. The main things mentioned are a glimpse of Akatsuki's past and some sort of plan by one of the factions that causes war to break out again, forcing Akatsuki to go back and fix it.
Before proceeding, we're gonna make a distinction. While the anime establishes the lore kinda decently, the story rarely progresses, getting started pretty much in episode 8. During the first 4 or 5 episodes, the show establishes the backstory of the main characters, their intentions and internal conflicts. We also get a glimpse on how the world works, how the Babel Academy functions, and what happened in the other world where Miu's father was killed by the protagonist. Portions of the first episodes are used for these purposes, which is good. However, the remaining runtime is used mostly for crappy ecchi sections which barely accomplish any narrative purpose. To make it clear, we are not complaining for having ecchi scenes in an ecchi show, but the moments in which they are used are not on point, making the rhythm of the show awkward at times. While jokes and ecchi can be good to settle a good mood, so story sections are not a drag to watch, most of the times again, these sections feel like literal filler to hit the 25-minute mark. In 1 or 2 episodes they kinda work, such as the infamous peeing scene, but aside from that, nothing happens, and when an internal change happens in one of the characters, it's rushed as fuck, and thus feels forced and superficial. Probably the worst example is episode 7, aka the beach episode, where we get the usual beach episode shenanigans. But because they needed to add conflict, we get some scenes from the other world, where we establish the villain for the final arc. The build-up and setup for the season's climax is presented in a beach episode where the goal is to steal swimsuits. Let that sink in.
Pay your taxes now or you will go to prison.
To sum up, while the show tried to establish a world with clear rules and a conflict, the rest of the story didn't lead to such build-up. It's good to establish motivations and lore to understand and comprehend what's at stake. But what's the purpose if, after presenting Miu's internal conflict regarding her feelings for Akatsuki, which is, by all means, an interesting plot point for the series, you solve it by buying fucking underwear? Oh, and the other girls are here as well?
Fuck you.
All of this sounds cool on paper, and I really want to know more about this world. It's almost like they just want to hook me up in the story to buy the light novel, so I can find out what happened next. And I totally would if I knew how to read. Or if the creator hadn't ditched it for his other more popular novel. Now let's take a short break. I don't want to mislead you and make you think that Hagure Yuusha expands a lot of the plot, because that's not the case at all. What I just described are the 10 minutes of plot I gathered from the whole fucking anime. The rest of the animation is poor character presentation, some good ecchi scenes, some good battles, and a lot of fillers that make no sense.
At first glance, Hagure Yuusha looks like your average run-of-the-mill post-2010 anime, with mildly colorful visuals and a very bland art style. Upon closer inspection, you will notice several issues that range from funny-looking frames to plain design inconsistencies or fails.
While the anime doesn't have a very strong or unique art style, the character design can be tagged as bulky JoJo-like characters. While JoJo, at least up to part 3, had wide-looking characters, these traits were only used for stronger ones, such as the protagonists themselves. Townsfolk or average people kept normal proportions to make a contrast between them and our heroes and villains, who have superior physical capabilities and clearly unique character designs. Hagure Yuusha, while Akatsuki and other guys are bulkier and stronger than other students, female characters also have similar proportions to male characters. And unless they are, I don't know, Amazon's fighter, this shouldn't be the case. Regardless, even the anime can't keep its own set of rules. As you progress throughout the series, sometimes characters look wide and powerful, but sometimes they don't. Other times characters shrink out of nowhere, but 10 seconds later they look like normal. In other situations, I question all my knowledge in anatomy, as this guy has fucking Popeye arms. Until he doesn't.
The most commendable aspect, animation-wise, are the edgy scenes. They're quite fluid and detailed, and with how often they appear, you can enjoy them if you don't think too much about it. The contrast in quality is quite impressive sometimes. I wonder what the studio used to animate.
In the end, I can't say that Hagure Yuusha is that bad visually. It's boring and generic to look for sure, but a more appropriate descriptor would be lazy. There are a lot of issues that can be addressed by the animators, directors or editors, but they were not giving two fucks of what was being shown in the screen. I mean, characters moving their mouth and not talking, or muscles where they don't belong are not nitpicks. Several issues are crystal clear, and at least one of the departments should have said, hey, maybe we should fix some of these problems. But they didn't.
For a shonen anime, battle scenes are very scarce. There are a few ones during the first episodes, but then the anime shows its true colors and goes full ecchi mode. Similar to redo of Healer. Most of the budget went to the ecchi scenes, where animations tend to be more fluid and dynamic. Sadly, this isn't saying much, because the scenes are still plain animations at best, with only a few memorable fanservice scenes.
Oddly enough, when there are fighting scenes, or action in general, these tend to drag on for an eternity. Aside from episode 12, where the animation is overall fluid and competent, the remaining episodes lack fluid animation with mostly static images with slight movements, have little usage of dynamic poses or angles, mostly showing the back of the characters or a simple shot showing the fighters at hand, don't show the attacks, usually showing the characters flying by the impact of said attacks while not showing the attack itself. Other times, these transitions are simply cutting to a different scene altogether. Kojima-level self-exposition, wondering whether I was reading a visual novel rather than watching an anime. Some dialogue is important in fighting scenes, but these were just redundant or pointless monologues. And an overall lack of ideas on how to construct fighting scenes, taking little risks while avoiding animating stuff as much as possible. Avoiding animation in an anime. Nice meme.
It's not like a decent balance between fan service and shonen is impossible to achieve. Hell, High School DxD or Rosario Vampire, not top tier shows in any capacity, managed to strike a fine balance between the ecchi and the fighting, sometimes mixing them for good measure.
The sound is meh. Voices were alright for the most part, with some important names here and there, like Angry Man, Rin Tosaka, and Cheetah Man. But working with a subpar script, they honestly can't do much regardless of their talent. Sound effects range from generic to terrible, with some poor choices here and there, like the Nickelodeon splat during the final fight.
Enough of your inane blathering!
Attacks during fight scenes lack impact by the merits of poor sound choices. Sometimes slash attack sounds like blunt ones. Entire fighting sections are oddly calm and silent when the screen shows full-fledged action, and so on. Finally, the sounds used are the usual ones that you hear in every generic Isekai, high school, harem, fiesta. Literally, Unity store asset flipping, sound design edition.
2012 was a messy year overall. Neil Armstrong died, the world sadly didn't end, and Vladimir Putin was re-elected. But we are not here to talk about that crap. We are here to talk about weep shit.
Easiest shit in the motherfucking Marvel 3, Marvel 2, fuck it!
That year saw the release of many fan-favorite series, and marked the start of a trend that is still strong today, Isekai. Regardless of your opinion on the series, you can't deny that Sword Art Online started a down part of protagonists getting trucked into another world, with series names that only keep increasing in length. A normal human suddenly being transported into a game or a different world, usually with magic and like 3 to 10 romantic options. Although Hagure Yuusha isn't exactly an isekai, as it begins after the protagonist's journey in the other world, it pretty much plays as one.
In the years prior, there was also a vast amount of bland and generic protagonists. Kindish, like a weakling that can sorta help when the plot requires it, who despite having barely any positive qualities has half of the cast wanting to bang them. They are also usually perverted, but lack any confidence to do anything at all, so they just blush or faint from a nosebleed. Akatsuki is pretty much the complete opposite. Ridiculously strong, built like a fucking tank, and a total pervert with an ego of the size of a semi-truck. So he acts upon his desires constantly. A total Chad. At least during its airing period. It's these factors that, in our opinion, generated the popularity that the series had during its prime. It was released just at the right time.
Hagure Yuusha had its time. It briefly shined many years ago, but right now it's a piece of history. As it stands, the anime is average at best, and the few memorable scenes that it has do not justify watching 12 episodes. It's not such a bad show as it is disappointing. The world setting, while it had interesting tidbits, is completely pointless when the story itself does nothing but waste time in the form of fanservice or pointless plot points. We can't recommend the show as is as forgettable as it gets, and the redeemable qualities can't carry the entire show. If you really are into badass characters or generic isekais, and you have spare time, then sure, Hagure Yuusha might give you a surprise or two. Otherwise, just watch a better show altogether. In conclusion, the sad reality is that this show is just an advertisement for a light novel that's been on hold since 2013. There isn't really anything to look forward to.
Looks like somebody needs a breakdown of the unofficial rules.